Now that we've talked about the fundamental aspects of contracts and contract law, we can take on how contracts are used with real estate. To start off this discussion, we'll address the main categories of real estate contracts: bilateral contracts versus unilateral contracts, expressed contracts versus implied contracts, and exclusive contracts versus non-exclusive contracts. Bilateral contracts are the most common form of real estate contract. They obligate both parties to the agreement to complete some type of performance. The seller agrees to sell, and the buyer agrees to buy. In this type of contract, all of the parties that are involved have to make promises to each other and honor those promises. Unilateral contracts, on the other hand, only obligate one person to act. An option agreement is a form of unilateral agreement. The seller is obligated to sell, but the buyer isn't obligated to buy. The buyer has the option to acquire the property, but doesn't have to exercise it. In an express contract, all the parties to the contract state the conditions and terms of the contract. Express contracts can be either written or verbal. An express contract is the type of agreement most people think of when they hear the term contract. An implied contract isn't a formal agreement of any type. This type of contract is brought about by the intentions, relationships, and actions of the parties who end up being considered parties to the contract. Implied contracts are extremely rare in the real estate market. This is due to the fact that real estate contracts are normally required to be in writing, which makes them expressed contracts. The existence of an implied contract is often determined by a court of law. In this situation, a party is being held responsible for not fulfilling the duties of a contract that existed even when no one intended to it. Similar to the idea of apparent authority and agency created by estoppel, the party's statements or actions were enough to establish an agreement with the other party. The implied contract is being applied as a way to require one party to provide the other party with something that should have been delivered. Say we have June, a broker who operates her brokerage out of a leased space in an office building. One day, the owner of the office building, Dennis, who is a friend of June's, mentions that the building needs more tenants to cover the operating expenses. On her own time, June lists and markets the building to potential tenants. Seeing an upswing in tenants in the building, Dennis decides to reduce the rent owed by June's brokerage. However, Dennis's satisfaction soon disappears when he learns that a tenant backed out of leasing a space in the building because of a problem with June. Apparently, she revealed some information about the building she shouldn't have to the potential tenant. When confronted, June claims that she didn't have a listing contract with Dennis, so she didn't owe him any fiduciary duties. Dennis files a lawsuit against June. He claims that based on June's actions and the reduction of rent, an implied contract existed between the two of them. The court sides in favor of Dennis. It's found that June's listing and marketing of the property and the acceptance of the rental reduction constituted an implied agency contract. Since June was acting as Dennis's agent, she failed to fulfill the fiduciary duty of confidentiality. As a result, she owes damages to Dennis. The last two categories of contracts we should talk about are exclusive and non-exclusive contracts. An exclusive contract, such as an exclusive right to sell listing or an exclusive right to represent buyer-broker agreement, requires a client to use the services of a specific real estate professional. Exclusive contracts normally contain a requirement that commission be paid to the real estate broker listed in the contract and only that real estate professional. This commission is owed regardless of the broker's level of involvement in the sale or purchase of the property. A non-exclusive contract, such as a non-exclusive listing or a non-exclusive not-for-compensation buyer-broker agreement, doesn't require the client to use the services of only one real estate professional. Additionally, the client doesn't have to pay commission to their real estate broker if someone else, including the client, does the majority of the work to complete the sale or purchase. Now, let's take a look at the specific kinds of real estate contracts you'll work with.